MyCORE is on a mission to be the world's most people-centric company. The purpose of this podcast is to get to the core of people. I'm your host, Nathan Bourne, and I invite you to join me as we deep dive into the personal and professional lives of our guests. We're going to learn who they are, why they exist, and what they do. We're going to hear their stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly. In other words, we're going to talk to some really cool people. Welcome to the MyCORE Podcast. All right, let's rock and roll.
Good.
Hello. Welcome to the MyCORE Podcast. This is your host, Nathan Bourne, and I'm excited for today's conversation, number 026, with Jason Richards. What's up, man?
Hey, it's good to see you, man.
Yeah, you too. I am excited to do this episode with you. I know we met through a good and dear friends, Curtis and Susan Marie, but you met Susan Marie originally through BNI?
Yeah, through BNI, and we live a couple miles from each other, but big world. I moved down here in Oregon in middle of 2018, and then 2020, obviously, the world lost its mind, and so I didn't get out and meet a lot of people.
I don't know if that's geographical, but there's not a lot that Oregon can be down from. So did you move from north of Oregon, or did you just say, like a lot of people, like, I moved down here?
No, from Seattle. So geographically I did move down, but yeah, that's fun.
I was home in Maryland for the last few weeks. I'm here in Florida now. And, some people have never really left that area. It's just kind of a small town on the beach. And several times people would say, like, when did you come down here from Florida? And I'm like, I didn't come down. I came up. I was like, you're a dick. So I didn't say it. I just thought it, which I don't know if that counts.
Yeah.
So very cool, man. Well, that's awesome. I know today we're going to talk about all kinds of things. When you and Susan Marie first met, I think probably one of your first interactions, she was like, just met this great guy, like got his book. And I was like, well, don't tempt me with a good time. Let's meet. So I know we've done a Zoom and got to kind of talk shop and life and leadership. But I actually do go back and listen to the episode. Some, I think, podcasters act cool and are like, I never watch the episode and I don't look at the analytics as well. I do. I look at it. I check it like every hour in the hour. What are you talking about? And in that conversation I was having with one of my best friends, somebody I go back many years, we just talked about like our life events, many of which were challenging and traumatic. And we kind of got into this conversation around, and this isn't an exact science, there's obviously exceptions, but that most of the most interesting, capable, maybe even fascinating people that I've met, when you get under the hood of their story, something tragic or traumatic often occurs. And I know in your life you lost a brother to drug addiction.
Yeah.
Was that an overdose? Yeah.
Yeah. It was right when fentanyl was, I think people know about fentanyl now, but it was right when it was first starting to, come on the market. Sounds like a very generic way to put it. Right. But it was dosing. People didn't know what they were doing. Right. It's a way that the dealers can get their cut, if you will. It's
just awful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sad. It's tragic. Unfortunately, it's too common these days. So it is what it is, and it sucks. But
I have siblings that are addicts. One in particular, he's the fifth of the 9 of us. So we were very close, just being brothers in the birth order.
Yeah,
closest. And he actually July 4th will be his 3rd year of sobriety.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But there were some times there that were really bad. And I just remember this anxiety where like my mom would call and I almost wanted to just be like, can you just, if you call, like, tell me nothing's wrong first, cause I will sit there sometimes and be like, is she going to about to tell, like when you have a sibling, a loved one, somebody you care about that is an addict, I feel like you're almost on eggshells wondering if you're going to get that call. And especially with the commonality now with fentanyl and just the way people are dropping dead. So I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about that, but it sounds like it's defined you a great deal. When was this? When did he pass away?
Yeah, it was kind of a strange time. It was all in 2017 is when it was. And the interesting thing about that time is it wasn't just, it was actually like a 6-month time span where we had 9 family members pass away. So my father-in-law was one, an aunt, my little brother, different things, right? But it was just kind of this crazy feeling of what is going on. And in the middle of that, also had this big business deal we were doing in New Zealand. I was about to jump on a plane to go to capital city in New Zealand and ink the deal, and they killed it basically like unilaterally. And that was right between my father-in-law passed away end of June 2017, and that was August of 2017. When that happened, then my little brother passed away in October, and then my grandpa passed away like 2 weeks after that or something.
That was all within the same year.
Oh yeah, all within like 6 months. It was just like this crazy roller coaster, right? And when I was actually speaking at an event 2 days ago, and we were talking about that, about adapting, like life-defining moments. And I shared that with the table, and I was like, you could just kind of like suck the oxygen out of the room a little bit.
Whoa.
And there's enough distance now, if you will, even though when you go through that type of like loss, tragedy, grief, it's kind of this weird thing. And unless you've gone through something like that, it's not a club you want to be part of, but everybody's going to be part of it eventually, right? Because everybody's passing away, and we're going to lose loved ones and things. But I think in that moment, it brings a lot of clarity and perspective about things that are actually important, right? And obviously, I do a lot of business, I do a lot of things, and but if you understand the human elements of what is it to be human, and what makes that unique, right? What are those relationships, and are they moving you forward, or are they stagnating you? And so a lot of the works I do, and the talk that I was giving was essentially on, are you being aware of your inputs and the circle that you are developing around you? But yeah, it was an interesting, tough time, because you're right. It wasn't like it was just like one thing that happened and then he was gone, right? A long time, and he was homeless in Spokane, Washington for a number of years. And during that time, people would ask me, how's your brother doing? And I hadn't heard from him for years. And I said, well, from what I can tell, he's not in prison or not dead. Like, I think he's alive, and I don't think he's in prison, because I think I would have heard of those things. But in the same way, right, you have to have strong boundaries, as you know, right? When you have somebody in your family's an addict, you're like, I love you, but I can't walk into this craziness with you, right? I need to distance myself a little bit, which is hard too, right? It has its own grief process that goes with it. And as far as like the drug thing is concerned, it's interesting, because like when we were kids, it was, the DARE program, right? You got your cool friend, and it was marijuana was like that's the one you wanted to avoid.
A gateway drug, yeah.
Exactly. And it's funny now, like as that has changed, because like I tell my kids all, I've got two boys. My 5-year-old's a little bit, too young to really understand it, but my other son's 12, and I'm open with him, like, listen, buddy, the thing that actually killed my brother wasn't the drug as much as it was hiding it. And that's the thing that addiction does, right? It drives isolation and those types of things. And the more that is driven into hiding, then there's no ability to reach out and get help. And I know it's hard. Like I get it. Coming out of addiction is a really tough thing. But all of that to say is that with my kids, I tell them all the time, I'm like, when we were kids, it was like, hey, don't do drugs, because you might not get a good test score. But now it's like, no, literally don't even touch it, because you could die.
Just die. Just
gone. Yeah. And there's, unfortunately, again, there's so many stories of that happening with kids that are, 4.0 GPA. They didn't do anything. They just, at a senior all night party, and somebody had something and they took it once, and they're gone, So, it's a difficult thing to communicate, where it's just like, we're playing for keeps now, right? When it comes to the drugs.
Right. And I just don't get it. like we live in a fallen world, and there are bad people that do bad things.
Yeah.
And it just amazes me that the people that are part of the supply chain for this would be willing, kind of back to your point, like the way I think our programming around drugs or education around it was that it was like people that overdosed, they didn't just dose.
Right.
Like, or one-time dose, it was like, wow, they just drove themselves to a place where like their bodies shut down because of like the injection of heroin for the 100,000, I don't know, thousands. I don't know. I'm not educated on this, but like, so it was like, I mean, that's like way strung out, right? Like that's way lost. But like you said, like the kid has it together could just one night be like, yeah, dude, let me take a bump, dead. Yep. And it's like, holy shit. Like we're playing Russian roulette with whatever, a good time or a high. And then I think like the people that put it in there, like how much does the devil have a hold on them that they are so selfish to make money that they're like, this is going to kill a person?
Yeah.
Because I don't know enough, but like,
yeah,
like I saw this video and it was like this much, and it was like the fentanyl was like that much fentanyl will kill you. I'm like, oh my God, this is like really disturbing.
Yeah. And I think, not if I play devil's advocate on the other side, I think, so like when my little brother died, it was fentanyl. They figured it out, but there was also like, I think 7 other deaths that happened in 2 weeks. So it was obviously a batch that came through that was not good. Most, I don't make it a habit to hang out with too many drug dealers, but the ones I know or I experienced growing up, they're not necessarily the sharpest people. And meaning that's like, they don't know what dosing should be or couldn't be. And so they're like, great. Like if I can get away with, selling this and it gives a great high, but it's way less, then great, I'm going to put it in. But like you said, like the dosing of a good time to dead there's not a whole lot of, not a big delta there. So
no, there's not like the margin of error. Like it's like, but not to sound like a jerk, but I don't think that most drug dealers are factoring in these, I don't think they're whiteboarding it and realizing like, hey guys, if we increase productivity, the supply and demand, they probably didn't take econ and it's,
you are right from the higher level view, if you will, like the dumb kid that was distributing it in little town Montana is different than the cartels that are organized, that they're like, we don't actually care.
They're like,
that's the evil for sure, where it's like they know what they're doing and they know that it's going to be devastating. And then
it trickles down to these levels where people are actually impacted, and it's so far removed from them and their daily interactions and the lifestyle that they have because of it. I mean, there's like a lot of television shows about this, so you can kind of like get it through Hollywood or through, I guess Netflix is the new Hollywood now. But so, man, you had this like year from hell in 2017. Do you feel that you were resilient throughout it? Like, how'd you do in that year? Because we've talked about like this gauntlet of craziness. And I think the saddest, most tragic, for obvious reasons, is the loss of your brother. How did you handle that? Like, did that spin you into a depression? Did you bury it and ignore it and it reared its head last year? How was your mental health and just like, how'd you manage that, dude?
That's a fair question. I think fortunately for me, I was already in therapy and counseling for other things for, I think about a year before that. So, so I live back, like I'm from Montana. So that's where my family's from and things. So I was, back in Montana for father-in-law's funeral and all that stuff that happened. And then, back in Seattle talking to my therapist. And then, I mean, he couldn't believe it either. He was just like, oh my gosh, bro. Oh yeah, by the way, I got to go back to Montana because this family member died and this family member. He's like, so I think, like, honestly, it's like, thank God that I had that at that time, to help me like run through it, process it. because I had all my own stuff. And then in business, business wasn't going well. And so it was the year before that, it was, I think it was December of 2016. And basically had gone broke, moved to Seattle trying to make this business work. And it just wasn't working. And so, anyway, so I just remember like walking through Target, and my little guy at the time was 3, and he saw this little like car hauler, like one of those semi trucks that puts the Matchbox cars.
Yep.
And it was $20. And I remember just like standing there in Target and being like, I don't have freaking $20 to buy this for my kid. And just kind of this kind of like a wake up call in a way, where it's just like, dude,
I've been there.
I got to figure my stuff out.
I've had situations like that, except even worse, I was at Walmart. So
Target was just closer to us, so that's all.
Right, I'm joking.
Yeah. But it's right. It's interesting. And so when you're talking about like resilience and like the definition of one of my favorite definitions is just toughness. What is that? It's like the mental structures that you have in place to move forward. And again, I think that fortunately I was, going through therapy, but then also, because of my I wish I could say that it was my faith that carried me through, because previous to that, I was a youth pastor for 6 years. And,
right.
Actually I was more at that point in my journey. I think I was just pissed off at God. Just like, what the hell? Like, I thought I was doing everything the right way. I thought that I'm on a good track. I'm not. My family's not doing well. I'm not doing well. And then all this happens. And so, but again, I think part of it is maybe there's some stubbornness of growing up. Like, I don't know, being from Montana, it was just kind of like, I'm not taking handouts. So
I was gonna say, are you like Yellowstone, Montana? Like, what was life in like what kind of Montana are we talking here?
Yeah. So I was born in Butte, which is the home of Evel Knievel. So it's kind of a tough town. I moved from there when I was 6. Moved to this little coal mining town, middle of nowhere, eastern Montana, called Colstrip. And then went to high school, got married, that kind of stuff in Helena, which is the capital of western half.
That's probably the only thing I know about Montana. That Yellowstone.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's so funny because people do ask me that all the time. They're like, "Wait, I haven't actually watched Yellowstone."
I haven't either. I've just seen a couple episodes. So
yeah. So I was like, but yeah, I think it's probably fairly accurate, except for the one thing that they don't show that I didn't know is that there's no winters in the show Yellowstone. I'm like, well, that's completely false advertising because
you have some brutal ones.
And some brutal winters, yeah.
So are you suggesting that the physical elements and like getting out in the rough and tough like terrain of Montana helped build your mental resilience through these life events?
Yeah, I think there's an element of that. Because the joke is like, if you're from Montana, like you probably should know how to fix a tractor, and there's just stuff you have to do. So I actually grew up, my parents were great, and my dad loves being outside. Like there's an element to like doing hard things, whether it's rock climbing, mountaineering, you're on a glacier, rope teams, that you just have to learn how to get through stuff. And it's an interesting thought because, I was the CEO of a robotics company for a while, and there's a lot of artificial intelligence and neural networks, and there's a lot of those types of things. So people will ask me every now and then my thoughts on where all that's headed. But I think the thing that is most interesting to me, again, because having kids, is it seems to be any friends that I have that have kids that are older than me, they're like early college or late high school. The feedback I get from them pretty routinely is, don't give your kids a smartphone because they're just getting sucked into it and different things. And I think my background in tech, I already didn't want to do that anyway, just because I know there's a lot of things that are coming and not so good things. But half of my kids' friends that are about the same age, they're really afraid to do anything because they live kind of in this digital world of like Minecraft and social media and whatever, to where like I have a friend and he has a son the same age, and we wanted to go snowboarding together. I'm like, well, yeah, bring your kiddo. He's like, no, he won't come. because he's afraid he's going to get hurt. I'm like, well, he's definitely going to get hurt.
Yeah, like I can guarantee that.
Yeah, but that's the point, right? That's the point of
Wow.
if you don't go through a hard thing, you're not going to get better. But so anyway, half of them kind of like sucked into this digital world, and the other half, of his peers that have parents that are similar to us, where it's like, you don't need a smartphone. You need to go out and climb a tree. Like you need to go and do things. And it's interesting. So when I was an executive at a company, I was talking to the COO at the time, and we were having some difficulty with middle managers doing something. And he just stopped and looked at me. He was a sniper in the Army, kind of an all-American badass. Cool. And he just stopped and he looked at me. He's like, "What's the hardest thing you've ever done?" Like, oh man. And so I started like listening, like different things. I'm like, you're like mental, emotional, like
like, what are we talking about?
What are we talking about? And so I started listening to some different things, and some crazy experiences of a friend falling off a cliff in Guatemala and breaking his arms and having concussion, and we have to get him out, and that kind of stuff. I was like, okay, yeah, physically, that's mentally, emotionally. My brother passed away, right? It's an emotional thing. So anyway, as we were talking, and he said, that's the problem. So what's the problem? He said, the guy that we were having a hard time with, we asked him the same question. I said, what's the hardest thing you've ever done? He's like, well, I lost a basketball tournament once. It's like, oh, okay. Like the hardest thing you've ever done is the hardest thing you've ever done. It doesn't mean,
right.
You know what I mean? And it just, you have a different level threshold of pain. So to answer your question in a very long way, like I just did, is that, I think growing up in Montana, and I think it's really just more forcing yourself to do the hard thing. And by doing that hard thing, you realize like, okay, that didn't kill me. Like I can get through that too. And so, I think that obviously like helps build a more resilient mindset, because
it's good. If
you've done hard things, then your level of difficulty is going to be pretty low. You have a low pain threshold, I guess. But
it's really eye-opening even in this moment for me. It could just be, it's probably fresh in my mind because I just was with my family for 3 weeks. Yeah. And I like entered their world, which was my life, for 18 years, 18 years. And it's not like I haven't seen them since then, but I'm 36 now, and I'm at this interesting intersection or threshold where I have lived half my life one way and half my life another way, 18 times 2, 36. Yeah. And it's not exactly comparable because, as we know, those formative years are worth so much more because they inform, the rest of the duration. But I'm a little bit of an odd creature within my family because the way I live, as far as like make money and show up in the world, and is different than them. So, like my hands are soft, and theirs are rugged, and I don't have paint on my clothing and things. I had this really cool moment with my brother. He's 25. He's got a business called Rough Seas, and he's just crushing it. Like I'm super proud of him. Nice. And I kind of forgot that I said this, but when you're just super wise guy like you, Jason, you just spout out and pontificate, off the cuff. It's like, but it kind of reminded me of in Talladega Nights when he's like, what do you mean if you're not first, you're last? And he's like, if you're not first, you're last. He's like, I live my whole life on that. And he's like, oh, that was just a stupid bumper sticker, whatever. So I guess I had said to him some time ago, and I stand by it. I'm not being flippant about it. I said to him, hey, the next time I see you, I don't want you to have any paint on you. And I was essentially just saying, like, if you are painting in your painting business, then you are not doing it right. And I guess it stuck with him as his older brother, because he's developed his business now to where he really doesn't do the work, right? He has a crew, and he sells the jobs, and he's building a brand and infrastructure and all these things. Now, at the same time, sometimes you got to roll up your sleeves and show people how to do the deal. And, so it's not an exact science, right? But it was kind of a cool moment for me going, oh, cool, that stuck with him. And I don't think it was that one thing, but it was part of a bigger narrative and a path that he's on to say, I'm building an enterprise, I'm building an infrastructure, I'm building a framework, right? That can yield these things as outputs, and not just trade my time for money. But as you were sharing there, it just got me thinking about all the hard shit that we did growing up. I mean, the elements, and not because normally the way I frame my story is more like adversity along the lines of like things happened to us. We were evicted. I was one of 9 children. My parents, raised us in poverty. And then wrestling has always been this thing that I point to because it's really freaking hard, and I have battle wounds to prove it. And it's a tough thing. And I told you this when we first met. You remind me a great deal of Luke, my best friend. He was a college wrestler, and you guys are very similar. You resemble each other, but also just from the way you speak, your diction, all that. And we have that bond that like nothing could ever be harder than cutting weight and being a Division I wrestler and getting your ass kicked and like that whole just journey.
Yeah.
But you know what? My dad put us out in the elements where we hunted and we slept in the field and we like worked hard on the land. And this was in Maryland. So it was like not your typical Montana. But I love the way you said that and framed that. Like, what's the hardest thing you've ever done? And if you can't answer that question, like go do hard shit. Like I put up a post recently. I think I was just working out or something. I was just like, do hard shit, like just do hard stuff all the time. And I think that you're right. People are getting like soft in this digital world. And it's a little bit disturbing what the world will look like. You fast forward 20, 30 years. It's kind of like, I wonder.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be interesting. Cause I think that I see kind of this weird inflection point right now. I think is in terms of like artificial intelligence and things like that. I think that people are still in the honeymoon phase where they're like, oh yeah, this is awesome. And people are, you're starting to get the laggards starting to show up, right? They're figuring out like, oh, I should probably learn what ChatGPT means.
I've been shocked by some of the people that are using it. I'm like, oh, I never thought. I'm like, this really is systemic. like your grandfather would be like, I was on chat yesterday. You're like, what?
Yeah.
Like,
what? Yeah. But at the same time, during this honeymoon phase, I think that people are going to be craving more and more the real, because, I was on this Zoom call with somebody last week, and I looked at her. I said, "Take this the right way." I said, "You could be a robot for all I know." So we've never met in person. Right. I've met Susan Marie and she vouches that you're a real person. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to say that Nathan's real. Right. But in the same way, it's kind of interesting to think that is happening in the same way, like the music industry. Cause I call myself a musician. But in the music world, right, the majority of the industry was all around record sales, right? Everything was driven around record sales and the deals and stuff like that. And concerts were just kind of like, okay, yeah, it's a good way to like get your name out there so that you can sell records. Now that's completely opposite, right?
Right.
Spotify and other streaming services have made it so that there's really not a whole lot of money in the record. The money is in the experience. And so the more that musicians are tapping into that and the experience, I mean, there's a reason that Taylor Swift, I don't know what the number is that you charge for a ticket to go to see Taylor Swift. I'm not going to pay it myself, but
it's just the most, whatever it is, it's the most.
Yeah, it's the most. Yeah. But even like I was, looking at, Coldplay's doing a tour. I'm like, that'd be fun. I saw them several years ago, and I'm like, wow, that ticket has 10x since the last time I saw them. Easily, right? And I'm just like,
this is good.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, all I have to say that I think that people are longing for that human element in a much bigger way than ever before. I mean, you even see. And I know that with MyCORE and the marketing stuff that you guys do, it's the same thing. I'm sure you've seen it as well. That I saw this graph recently, I think a week or two ago, that they looked at the number of posts and blog posts and marketing messaging. It's almost 2x in the last 2 years. Now that's insane. Like if you think about the amount of marketing and messaging that's been out there anyway,
right?
That's doubled. In the same way, like I don't know about you, but I ignore probably 95% of the emails I get because they're all spam. Like pretty much everything is just like, okay, hey, we could help you with this. We could help this. It's like, okay, well, I don't know you. I don't like you. I don't trust you. So how are we going to do business? So all that to say is I think that the people that lean into the human elements, the human interactions, I think those are the people that are going to, I think that's going to be the biggest difference maker in the next 5 years because technology.
Jason, I love what you're talking about. This is way up my alley. Like,
Yeah.
Yes, yes, and yes. So to drill that down even further, and then back to you, I'd love to. I got some questions for you around this. So the mission of MyCORE is to be the world's most people-centric company.
I know. I love that. Yeah.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
And even this podcast, like I had to record. I didn't have to, but I chose to record an introduction for it, and I start the little spiel by saying the mission of MyCORE is to be the world's most people-centric company. The purpose of this podcast is to get to the core of people and essentially to have this conversation around good, bad, and ugly. And at first, like in 2018, as it says here, established 2018, when I founded the company, at that time, it still was sort of an ideal. It was altruistic. It was a North Star. It felt like a value and a mission versus like a strategy or something that was tactical.
Right.
To your point, with the advent and just surge of AI, with the discernment becoming so fuzzy,
yeah,
I'm like, I've recalibrated that and went, wait a second, being the world's most people-centric company actually means something. like it does something. It has a function in the world now, not just like, oh, that feels good. That's warm and fuzzy. So I started writing because one of our core values, I'm not on your level yet, but I'm going to be published like you soon, bro. Next time we talk, I'm going to be published. Right? I want to talk about your book too. I have it right here. But I'm actually flying to Oregon next week to lock in with Susan Marie. You're there, then we got to meet, man. I'll be there.
Dude, yeah. Oh, I'm around.
We could have done this in person. I didn't even think about that, man. But it was like kind of a last minute thing. But yeah. I'm going to come out there to finish the book, essentially, right?
Yes, yeah.
And it's like, why don't you just do that in your office? Yeah, I wish I could. Like if I could somehow just get myself to do it, but. So what I've done is I've started this newsletter, okay? And I thought this might help me start to just like build the brand around it and flesh out in written form some of the concepts that will be chapters and elongated. So anyway, I committed to writing the book and the newsletter, and I hate that this even has to get stated, without any AI. So no ChatGPT, no AI, like me. Perfect. In my dome, and sure, like you can do research, like there's always been, and put your, sources and works cited and all that. But I started writing, right? And I thought, you know what? We should brand this because fat free has done rather well for itself all these years. Gluten free is all the craze.
Yeah.
What if we create a badge that said AI free?
Yeah.
So I had Kenya, our chief brand officer, I'll have to send it to you. It's really dope. It's like this badge banner and it says AI free certified thoughtful. Isn't that fun?
That's awesome.
I'm like, because to your point, like it's getting to now where we're going to have to certify that this is real, that this is a human. And that's obviously very ambiguous because it's like, what even are thoughts and original thoughts and all that? We're all kind of regurgitating. But I think the discernment, as a Christian, the word discernment was always like discerning whether that was the Holy Spirit or whether that was like you hadn't eaten lunch or, your gut feeling versus like logic and just that intersection and like collision between those things. So that's not new because nothing's new under the sun. But what's happening is it's getting so fuzzy and so gray that you're going to have to go, is this person real? And I think in a way, when you meet like a real human being in flesh and bones and you feel like they're not really authentic or they're kind of full of it or they're like, they don't really know who they are. It's almost like we have to take those skills, those filters, and apply them now to written words. So we're like, well, that's clearly not a person that wrote me that email. Or gosh, I mean, sales call, like we're going to have to be really keen as leaders in this next chapter because the game has changed. I mean, it is really crazy how you can get fooled. And that's for people that are with it, not to mention people that are clueless. It's pretty alarming.
Yeah, it is. Because I think the most vulnerable obviously are like grandparents. If you still have your grandparents around. So I tell my grandpa all the time, like, hey, if you ever get a call from me, it's even my voice, but it's not from a number say hang up and then call me. Because
I really need you. I'll call you again.
Yeah, and my kids too. Like I've told them, we've come up with phrases that nobody knows, right? It's just basically like safe words, if you will. And so
like pineapple.
I get a call from my kid sometime, and I ask him a question that I'm not going to tell everybody right here, right? But I ask him a certain question, and he doesn't know the answer to that question. It's like, great. The only person that would know that would be him. Right. And so if you can't answer that, it's like, great. That's a fake. So
this is crazy. Like the fact that we're talking about this and like, of course you're doing that. Of course you have code words with your children that may call you saying they're at the bus stop, but they're not, or their car broke down, but it didn't. The fact that like, I'm like, yeah, of course, what else is going on?
Makes sense.
That makes total sense. Like this is crazy that we just immediately, it's like our strength is our weakness, right? Like we're such adaptive creatures. And then we're on this perpetual loop of wanting to grow and change and self-actualize. Like the human condition is what fascinates me more than anything. I think it's the other reason I made the mission of the company that, because I was like, I can sink my teeth in that for the duration, like being people-centric. And I know this is just, we're totally aligned in this way from our conversations. What I'd love to do with you, if you're game, because I think we both could probably shed some light or share some of the things that we've learned or are learning, is it's like, how do you take this value and it not just live there in your heart, but it actually apply to your business, to your leadership, to the blueprint, to the framework of how you construct your life? Like, you're a wise guy. And you have this core value, call it being people-centric for, to keep it on brand with MyCORE, right? I mean, you may have another way you frame it. I'd love to hear that. But like, what are ways that our listeners can tap into that and apply it to something?
Yeah. In what way specifically? Like,
right. Let's do that. Let's drill it down further.
Yeah.
So leadership, let's start there. Like that's a super broad term. And a lot of times I think people think like, leader's the one with the loftier title or something. It's like, maybe, right? But there's levels, like Maxwell would talk about the 5 levels of leadership, right?
Yeah.
And I just would be curious your hot take on leadership, because you would think that everybody that has risen to leadership was naturally people-centric.
Right.
But that's not the case. Sometimes you're like, how the hell did you become the CEO of this company? You don't even really like people. You know, that, or there's entire industries that, not, entirely true, but if it's like a 51-49, it's like the majority of people in this industry don't like people. So it's like, how do we create more tolerance for people, but not through bullshit programs or, politics or, you kind of probably get what I'm touching on, but actual application. So we'll start with leadership. Maybe that's an area, because I know you have some forte there, or you have forte there. Not some.
Well, wise guy that was a good description. Yeah.
I'm on Socrates.
I think that, so one of the modalities that I use when I start working with leadership teams, because that's a lot of the work I do, is I go into companies and I help build leadership teams around founders, CEOs, things like that.
Yep.
And the first thing that I help people realize is not everybody's the same. And it seems like kind of a no-brainer.
Right.
But if you drill down to it a little bit more, like even this conversation, we are a weird minority of people, meaning that we actually care about, like, how do we get the best out of people? Now, that is not a common thought that most people have. And so one of the modalities I use, I don't know if you're familiar with it, is Kersey. So you're familiar with Myers-Briggs, the DISC profile.
Yeah. I know Myers-Briggs and just sort of assessments and that,
Yeah.
but not specifically that one.
Yeah. So the Kersey was actually developed, and it was the first publicly available personality test, if you will, back in the 70s. Dr. Kersey, he knew the Myers-Briggs, but Myers-Briggs was really focused on like inpatient type stuff, right?
Right.
Psychology. And he said, well, what if we just used it based on observation? How do we observe people? How do they communicate? How do they act? And from that, you go back historically, and there's always been like 4, big types going back to like Hippocrates with the Hippocratic Oath, and even like Ezekiel in the Bible. Even if you look at the Gospels, like they're all written very differently, and they speak to different people, not just like ethnically, but there's actually some ways. So anyway, in the Kersey model, there's 4 main archetypes. One is called the guardian, and these are the people that love checking the boxes. They love getting stuff done. You need those people. They're the backbone of society.
Yeah,
right? They're upstanding citizens. Then you have those that are the idealists, and this is where I think you and I would fall. Meaning, it's like, man, we're the ones that are thinking at a higher level, like how do we help people achieve enlightenment, right? Maslow, our hierarchy, right? Totally. And then you have those that are the artisans, and these are the ones that, man, they love a good party. They're fast, adaptable, right? They're gracious, right? They're the ones that are like the cool guys, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the rationals, and these are the ones that are some of the most brilliant thinkers, right? The really deep thinkers, very strategic minded, those types of things. So when I look at that modality, and the way that I help, because I help walk teams through this idea of the Kersey model. To your point, the founder, or not the founder, the CEO of Kersey, his name's Ed O'Kim, really cool guy, he's a friend of mine, and he's writing I think he's planning on writing a book, or maybe he just released it. It's called The Asshole Factor.
And, that's awesome.
Yeah, and
I like it already.
The book is about the artisans, right? Because you're right. There are some industries that are just cutthroat, and it's just known, right? Like the stock market is a good example of that, right? People that are stockbrokers, and it's just a dog eat dog world. Like, we're going to run you over, we're going to chew you up and spit you out, and we don't care, right? Okay, so those types of companies I don't work with very well.
Right.
I actually sat down with people, they wanted to bring me on as I was thinking of bringing them on as a client. And I realized, like, we just don't have the same value of people. And so that's okay. That just means I'm not going to work with you. I don't like working with assholes too terribly much. So there's that side. The thing that I find with those people specifically is if they don't have a different lens of like looking at other people, they're usually the people that end up really, really lonely later on in life. Because if you just use people and you're chewing people up and spitting them out all the time, what do you have to show for it? I mean, you might have a nice Ferrari, but you actually right? So that was a very long way. That's one modality that I use to like help people see, like, hey, not everybody in your team is going to see things the same way that you see them. And so the more that you can understand the other person's point of view and you can see from their lens, you can get better things out of them.
And on their own accord too. I think that's the part that's like so core to leadership is recognizing that people want to be great. They want to be great at their craft. They want to be great in their execution. And I think a lot of times leadership gets misconstrued, where it's like, how do I get somebody to do something that they wouldn't have done had I not been there? Or, like how do I influence them? And that's all very important. Obviously, I've always agreed with Maxwell's definition of leadership, influence, nothing more, nothing less. But it's like getting that buy-in to where they genuinely are showing up for it.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's like you need to bait the hook for what the fish like, not like what for you like. So like, I don't like eating worms. I like strawberries and cream, as Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? Dale Carnegie would put. Yeah. So it's like, how do you do that in a systemic way so that it's not a one-off? Certainly don't want it to be a manipulation. It's like within the infrastructure of your organization, people are showing up and putting their best foot forward. And it sounds like not that anyone fits into one box because you could have a little of this and a little of that.
Yeah.
But they're going to have a majority of this profile type. And it sounds like you're helping both in your practice and in your clients' practice, being a matchmaker too, to say like, oh, this is just a natural fit. You guys are going to rock it together. Why force it over here? If you went into stockbrokering or I don't know, maybe some of the trades even, and it was like, see, don't you get it? Like that person's life will be better if you do it this way. And they're like, do I look like I give a shit? Right. I wouldn't sign up for that class. I don't know that I would try to change that too much.
Yeah. But I think the other pieces, because even with people that maybe have a different, they're not necessarily like an idealist. They're thinking about like, how do I care about my people? Some are. And they are in the trades. Like I was working with a company.
I was actually just thinking that back to my brother, it's a prime example of some of this, treating people great. He's people centric. He's leading well.
Yeah. And I think that is, I don't think people like working for assholes. You know what I mean?
Not for long. Yeah.
Not for long.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting because several of the companies that I work with are in the trades, and I'm actually pretty bullish on the trades.
Cool.
Blue collar work. Because the reason that they started their company was because they didn't want to get treated that way anymore. And they didn't want other people to have to get treated that way as well.
Yeah.
And so I just did this exercise with it's a roofing company that's here in Oregon. It's starting to grow. And as we started to talk about it, we started to like think through like, hey, what is like, why did you start this company?
Yeah.
And then getting buy-in from the rest of the team, like, why are you here? Like, why are you working in this company? And amazing guy. I won't say who he is, but amazing guy. He's a immigrant. He's first generation American. And he has his boys that work with him, and he started getting tearful. I mean, he's a big, tough dude, like big Mexican dude. And he's starting to get tears in his eyes. And he's like, I just wanted to create a company where everybody can win. I was like, oh, that's beautiful, right? Like that's it.
Great.
And so it's helping companies realize, even those that don't necessarily think that way, how do you get the best out of your people so that your company can win?
Yeah.
And in my opinion, one of the best ways to do that is to start giving ownership away. Now, not necessarily like physical ownership,
right?
Or like the legal term, but starting to like help people understand, like you own this thing, man. You know, if you've ever read Jocko's stuff, right? Extreme ownership. You
Extreme
own
ownership.
Thing. And so, how do you take that and you internalize that, because that makes you better?
Yeah.
Right. It does. And so you become this training ground where people want to come work for you because they're like, oh, if I work for this company, they're the best.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's about taking companies and helping them become industry leaders, because that's the big, kind of the how I do what I do. Because if we're striving to be the best, and I believe the best is getting the best out of your people, happy employees make happy customers, which make happy businesses. And so if we start there and we work on the people side of the business, then all the other things kind of come into play.
Yeah, man, this is right up my alley. Yeah. It's interesting. One of the dangers in building core values and a worthy mission is that you'll find all these other ways to apply it. And then you're like, dang it, we have to do it. So I think and I say that sort of tongue in cheek, because it's a dangerous game to be dope. like if you do the work and you really have what it takes and you develop who you are, you're going to find these ways that you have to show up that are kind of limitless in nature.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, it's been 7 years coming up on our event that you're speaking at our event, I think. Are you speaking at our event?
Yeah. I heard Eugene. That'll be fun.
Dude, I'm stoked. Yeah, that's right. I saw your name on the list and I was like, yes. So that'll be cool, man. We'll talk more. And going into that event, a little plug for it. We're going to do an event in Eugene, Oregon, the first week of October. It's like the last day of September, I think, first couple days in October. You can find it on our website, mycore.ai. Go to the top tab. You'll see the Core Collective. And the idea of this event There's 3 tracks for the event. There's a leadership track. I know you'll be speaking relative to that content. There's a people ops track, and there's a marketing ops track. And the idea is that we wanted to kind of intertwine, create this like trifecta between leadership, people ops, and marketing. Because I think sometimes even if you have the goods, but you don't know how to communicate them to the world, right? You don't know how to show up in the world, then you're like the best kept secret, right? So my brother, back to him with Rough Seas, he's got a great business, got a great employer brand, he's got a great thing going, and he's in a market where the standard has been historically pretty low. The bar has been set pretty low, and he's crushing it at 25 because of relatively basic things like wearing uniforms and showing up on time and being fair in your pricing and just kind of like not sucking. So, and he's also like building an excellent experience and excellence. Well, back to your previous points, he's done a lot of hard things in his life. You know, he's got a lot of resilience, a lot of toughness, wrestling being one of them. My family are avid hunters, so they've just spent a lot of time in the water, on the water. I mean, they're like weathered humans. You know, like if I had one word to describe a Bourne, it's like we're durable. You know, I just have like maybe that more sheen because I've been inside more. You know, but I say all that to say that I believe in the purpose of this event and why we're launching it and going to be doing it annually is that you have to build like a collective, right? A core collective and be collaborative in nature, because businesses are much more like ecosystems today. They're not just a manufacturer and a supply chain. I mean, there's still businesses that operate that way, but to really build a modern business and to stay scrappy and nimble and then to have scale and impact, you have to kind of compartmentalize what is going to be like fully yours and what is going to be collaborated with another professional. Yeah. And I think a lot of businesses don't recognize that. And sometimes their strength becomes their weakness because they have this like rugged individualism, right? And they might even have come from some of the background where they did have to do it on their own, right? Because life just put them in a position where they were like, if it is to be, it's up to me. And that can kill you in business because you're not delegating, you're not watching your employees fall off the bike and skid their knee, and you're stepping in and fixing it. So I would imagine in your line of work that helping this sort of core collective mindset, that probably matters as well in your client interactions, because you're saying like, hey, take this gentleman in particular, the strength that got him to one level can quickly become the weakness that doesn't take them to the next level. I've learned that in my journey. There is an initial lift, like you have to just do it, you know, but then beyond that initial lift, there's like these really nuanced things. And it sounds like with your book, with your coaching, with the way that you show up in your clients, you're like unlocking these aspects of their thinking that I'm sure is showing up in the books as well, like their profitability and growth. Oh yeah. So I know I said a lot there, and I wanted to make a shameless plug for the event that you're going to be speaking at, that we're putting on. You can get tickets at on the website, but respond to any of that if you'd like. I know I threw a lot out there.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I think that I think management styles and leadership things have changed obviously over time. So like my grandpa, who's one of my heroes, he's still alive. And, he came out, you know, he was a kid during World War II, and went through the space race, and his name's at the Smithsonian because he was a big wig at Lockheed, putting people on the moon and satellites.
That's so cool.
Fighter jets and all sorts of stuff. Super cool guy. And the management style of the 60s was very much command and control, right? Right. You're going to do what I say. And if you don't like it, there's the door. And you better toughen up. You didn't wear a tie today? Like, here, I've got one for you, and it's going to be ugly. Right. We're going to make an example out of you. I mean, that was the style, right?
Right. You see it in the movies, yeah.
Oh man, yeah, and you just hear it in the stories of my grandpa. I'm like, yeah, that sounds accurate. So, right. And then it changed. You're right. It kind of changed, and that was just like, okay, we should probably think about like management. And I don't know if you found this, but even like when we hire really young people, like that, been a big shift there as well. In that, um, I think we're moving into an age of like higher collaboration, and meaning, right? People care about. People will invest in what they help create, right? If somebody has, even if their opinion or their idea sucks, the fact that you asked for it helps bring some buy-in. And so, yeah, so when I start working with companies, you're right. Like if it's, the sole painter, it's like, yeah, you got to hustle and you got to make it happen. That means you're probably painting and you're handing out flyers and you're,
Right.
knocking doors and all the stuff. But then at some point you have to realize like you've got a team around you that wants to help lift this load with you. And if you are not engaging them, not just like a pair of hands, but I need to engage your brain and I want you to come and let's collaborate together. And so a lot of the work that I do is when I go into a company is it's not just like, what are your core values? It's what are our core values? Because now you have a team and now this organism has taken a life of its own. And so what is that? What is that? And how do we flesh that out? And it's interesting even talking about like, AI and things like that, because I've been in so many of these rooms with leadership teams and they're coming up with core values and why they're here and, kind of the philosophical stuff to really set the culture, and the temperature of the business. And invariably somebody will whip a phone out and be like, oh, let's just ask ChatGPT. This will be easy. They put
The irony.
And it never works.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting. And the reason I think it never works is because it's missing, the soul component.
Yeah.
Right. It's missing the aha moment where it's like, okay, no, we are doing this together. Because if ChatGPT, if we just like offload it and ChatGPT comes with it, like we don't have the buy-in to that, right? That's not something we created. And so because we didn't create it, we don't feel for it, right? We don't have the feeling.
Yeah. So, oh man, that's good. I heard it this way years ago from my parents actually. And it's awesome if there's a foundation there for people that as a Christian, a lot of the Christianese you can just tune out because you've heard it so many times. But if you do get into life, parenting, leadership, business, entrepreneurship, you'll go, oh, wait, that's really applicable here. That's just something basic like sowing and reaping, right? Like, yeah, if you sow and then you reap, like that's input, output. That's pretty basic. Yeah. But this one was a little more intangible. And I heard it, and I'm sure you have too, that we're not physical beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a physical experience.
Yep.
Right? So if you believed that, like if that was something that you co-signed with, then your approach to people changes because now you're looking for ways for them to have a spiritual connection. Now, maybe spiritual is the highest order. That's kind of like, ooh, but emotional. Let's take it down to something like you give a shit, right? Like you actually care about it and it evokes something in you. Mm-hmm. So for me, I start with that in mind. And I think, okay, if I'm going to be leading people and these people are going to be leading people, then how do I infuse into the framework, into the content, into the blueprint, into the infrastructure, something that like wakes them up, right? I like the word evocative because it kind of sounds provocative, right? But I aim to be evocative. I want to evoke something in them that goes, oh, damn, I couldn't sleep last night. I was thinking about that. We call it MyCORE insomnia, right? Where it's like that you're just rattling your brain over these things. And so I think that's kind of what happens is in that sort of scenario that you shared, you pop it into chat and chat spits out something, but it wasn't created by this cohort of people. It was created by a machine. And then you're just trying to impose that and hoping that it somehow wells up and springs up emotion or a spiritual connection or some type of like intangible, like, let's go.
Yeah.
And then you're like, why didn't it work? Because it makes total sense. It sounds nice. And it's like, dude, that's just not how people, right? So I'm stoked about AI because I actually think it is drawing a stronger contrast and it's showing that people that are aiming for wisdom versus knowledge. And particularly if you already had, because you've been on this trip, both like journey and like you're tripping because then you go, oh, damn, I've been preparing for this. I've been painting the fence and waxing on and waxing off. Here comes AI at like large, and you're just like, boom, 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 boom. So I think people like yourself, I fancy myself this way too, so I'll say us. I think we're like just getting started on the value. Like we were kind of ahead of our time in a sense, even though this is ancient. It's like, I think businesses are getting more and more checked up from the neck up and maybe from the heart down, or however you'd say that, to go like, I need a Jason in my life on a regular basis or I will screw this up. I think that's exciting for the future of collaboration and business and the intangible and the tangible and all the things.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a lot to be said for even, right? So like with AI, because we keep talking about that there's, it's only as good as the context that you give it, right?
Right.
And it has, like, macro level, it does really well, but it doesn't know the people on your team, right? It doesn't
space.
Yeah, exactly. And let alone knowing the other dynamics of the people in the room, because people ask me, if I can come do the work that I do remotely, and most of the time I say no. If everybody's remote, that's one thing. But having one or two people remote makes it difficult because you're reading body language and you're kind of getting this sense like, okay, this person doesn't necessarily agree, right? And that comes from a gut, right? That's an intuition. That's other things that are going on. So for that reason, I think that it's good at research and things like that, but it doesn't know your specific context and doesn't have the soul spirit connection like you're talking about with other people. So it's lacking.
I think now, I don't know if you feel this way, but here's a case in point. Well, I'll justify why I keep going off camera. So in my studio here, there's a big window right here, right? I'm in Florida, so it's sunny Florida. And I have to respond to the literal weather, right? Yeah. Like because I'm not in a controlled environment with the same light that I flip on. Now there's other spaces here that I could do interior. I'm actually moving into a studio that's 3 times the size of this, which is exciting right here. It's got 2 of the 4 walls are windows. And I got the MyCORE green. It's like a whole thing. But I like that variable. Because to get the authentic sun, like the actual freaking sun that's shining right now, sometimes, like I just did, I have to change because, I don't know if you noticed it, but it was getting like yellow because of how bright it was based on the settings. But over the last hour that we've been talking, the actual sun and clouds have shifted and changed.
Right. Yeah.
Could I have not done that? Sure, it's fine. It just looks a little bright. But I like to set the stage and set the mood and set the tone and set the temperature of my life, so that in my leadership and in my content and in the way just the way I feel, I didn't like the way it looked. I didn't like it, so I just got up and changed it while you were talking. I think there's parallels there in that AI just tells you what you told it already. It doesn't pick up in a way that says, maybe the way you're saying it is the problem, like the temperature of the thing versus, because it's like they say, it's never what you say, it's how you say it. So in leadership, you have to know tone, you have to know temperature, you have to know that sometimes the golden hour of the day, let the sun set on that, sleep on it, we'll pick it up tomorrow. So that discernment, that wisdom, I love being a human being. I think it's the dopest, craziest, most brutal, beautiful, horrible thing ever. And anyone that's trying to replace that I think is going to get their butt kicked in the market. Actually, I think that time will promote or expose, and the people that are committed to infusing it, hardwiring it, and like making it work together in harmony are gonna win big.
Yeah, I agree. When I was at the speaking event a couple days ago, somebody asked me. They said, "Well, what are your thoughts on like what applications is AI good for?" You know, and I said, "Well, it's good for lots of things." I said,
Yeah.
and in the same way, it's going to prove that there's going to be some industries that are going to be obsolete. They just will be.
Right.
Because for example, it's great at research, like we were just talking about. Doesn't mean that you believe everything that it kicks out, obviously, right? It hallucinates and some other things, but the fact that you can do some research and at least have a starting point, like, I mean, before it was encyclopedias, right? And that's how everybody did their research. Or you go to the library and you got the DEX, right? The Dewey Decimal System. And then Google like helped, or it was Yahoo, right? And then it was Google, and then it like helped.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I could search stuff and I still have to validate it. And then ChatGPT is just like 10x that, where it's like, okay, it's going to do all that research for you. It's going to find all these web pages, spit out kind of a summary mashed together. And it's helpful because it gives you a better starting point. But you still have to bring, like you were saying, I love the word discernment. Like you have to bring discernment. You got to bring your brain to it and be skeptical of it. And so I think that, so there are some industries I think they're going to have a tough time. But
yeah, I think there's another thing that you were saying, and it made me think about what you were sharing earlier too around doing hard things. I say it this way sometimes. Look, I don't have all the answers. Some of this is just world according to Nathan, but the emphasis is on the wrong syllable, right? So what I think happens is that we as humans, for whatever reason, could be the free enterprise system, we are so obsessed with outputs that we don't consider the journey at which got you to that output. Yeah. So it's not that you built a hard thing, like you went out and built a barn and now you have a barn. It's, well, what did it take to erect that barn? Like, how hard was that? You look at like the Amish and the way that they build, like actually build shit. Yeah. Like, who did they become in that process when they look at it and go, because if you could snap your fingers and you had a physical form in the moment, and like 3D printing does a pretty disturbing deal. I've seen some videos around like houses that are being printed. I'm like, what? Like, this is insane. But like knowing that craftsmanship and the human condition within that is where the good stuff is I think is important too. So it's like when I talk about this AI free, certified, thoughtful, writing this newsletter, the output, you could probably go, dude, chat could have probably done that in like 30 seconds. And you imagine what you could have done with all the time. You spent hours on that. I'm like, yeah, but I spent hours on that, right? Like I got to be in that moment and in that experience for that time frame. And I'm kind of wondering where the pressure's coming from. Like to grow so fast, to eliminate so many layers to the process. Like it kind of sounds crazy and certainly contrary, but I'm like, why is everyone so obsessed with efficiency? Like I actually at MyCORE, and I think it's part of why we're successful, I keep manual, even analog, possibly antiquated, but definitely analog processes intentionally in the framework of the whole thing, because I'm like, wait, a human connection gets made when these problems are solved in community. And that's a bond that's like, that's not going anywhere. That's way more valuable than if it happened faster or more. Yeah. So that's a whole nother like ball of wax. But I just feel like the line of work that you're in, the value that you're bringing to your clients, it seems like it touches on all this too. And I think that the pendulum will swing, right, where we'll go, whoa, here's bad examples or good examples of somebody going too far with it. Yeah. And it toppled over because they cut out all this human factor, and yet it skyrocketed, but then it didn't sustain because you look at moments in our country's history, and in my lifetime at 36, the most monumental would be the September 11th, right? So attacks had a different flavor to it, but would be the crash of 2008.
Yep.
and then now COVID, and particularly September 11th, and COVID kind of got gnarly there, but people pulled together, right, in those moments. And we asked each other in the aftermath of COVID, it became this like common phrase, how you holding up?
Yeah.
Remember that, right? Just that first year, it's like, how you holding up? Well, now people aren't asking that.
Yeah.
It's like, but we still need to ask that. Like, we still need to ask people like, hey, how you holding up? Just because there's no mask and you're not socially distancing, you're not stuck in your house watching Netflix and binging, you still probably arguably are holding up worse than you were then, because there's no stimulus check. That life is back to a pretty stressful pace. Yeah. So I think that human factor, that people centric, I don't think it's just hooey or wooey. I think it's like you can get wealthy and build huge enterprises with this proper thinking, and you get the best reward, which is the good shit and the money. And that's just something that is kind of world according to Nathan, business according to Nathan, but I think we align in that way.
Yeah, I think you're right on with that. I just got done reading a book called Slow Productivity, which is an interesting read. And the guy wrote it after COVID. I think it was just like a year or two old. But that basically the concepts are, with the advent of AI and things like that, you're right. There's a continual ramp up for efficiency. Yes, and there needs to be obviously metrics on like efficiency just to see if people are even good at the job or whatever. But when it comes to thought work, like you and I both do, you need to have time for your brain to catch up, right? Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I was on some mastermind group, and somebody asked somebody about, is this going to replace, is chat going to replace things like movie writers and screenwriters and things like that? And the best answer I've heard is that chat can come up with the best movie that's ever been made, but it can't come up with the best movie that will be made.
All right, that's never been made. Yeah, right. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and the biggest breakthroughs that are still out there, I think, are still unlocked in human intelligence. Mm-hmm. And so to offload all of your thinking to a robot, I think is a terrible idea, because like you said, it's who you become in the process, and the ability to synthesize all those things. Because I was actually thinking about this morning in the shower, because I'm like, it's interesting because, for whatever reason, people, especially in probably our line of work, is that, I read all the time. I'm listening to podcasts. I'm getting people input. Like, I'm constantly like having my pulse on all sorts of different things. And my brain is then synthesizing that data so that how can I help somebody? Because it's not like it's just like, here's a book, and so here's the recipe, and this is going to work for everybody of all time. It's like, heck no. Like, which is why I love coming into companies and seeing like, who are your team? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Right. What's the next best step for you guys? Because just because chat probably has a different, here's your next best step, but it probably doesn't actually align with who you guys are and your guys' strengths and weaknesses and all the other pieces. The
reason I'm skeptical too, which sounds crazy, and what's funny too is just little insight on how I roll. So I was in this very space, and a friend of mine, I had him on like episode 2 or 3, like early in the podcast. He's super, super sharp guy. He showed me chat for the first time, like
nice.
2 years ago, maybe. It's probably 2 years ago. And he's like, check this out. And I'm like, what? I'm like, what did you even just say? Like chat, like chat GP, like that. It's not even like very good branding, like you'd think you'd call it something like Oracle, or like just Sage, or, but it's just chat GPT. I'm like, he shows it to me, obviously.
Definitely written by engineers.
Right. Exactly. And I'm like, oh, what? That's disturbing. So then my RAS filter picked it up, and I'm seeing it, right? So I immediately go buy MyCORE.ai and ProfitShare.ai. Well, actually, at that time, it was just MyCORE.
Okay.
We didn't have the other 2 brands yet. So then, through a series of events I won't bore you or our listeners with, I came up with, in my brain, novel idea, the brand Market Share, which sounds like market share, but the way I landed on that after racking my brain for a week or 2 was I was looking for words that had the letters AI in it. Pain, gain, train. I'm sitting right there on my chair, CHAIR, and I'm like, oh my God, has nobody put these words together? I was like, that sounds exactly like market share, but it's market share. And then same thing with profit share, right? So my chief brand officer, she's built an amazing brand since then, our websites and social media and all the things, right? But I do those things not because I think AI is like the greatest thing ever or going to replace everything. And maybe I'm naive. Who knows? We'll see. I don't want to live in that world. And this might make me sound like I'm 100 years old, and not 36. But the way I sort of see influence is you meet people where they're at based on what is probably a programmed perception from the powers that be. And then you, back to the drugs, you gateway drug them into the good shit. So you say, hey, I get that the world is rewarding, recognizing, acknowledging, or even claiming these things. And we bake them in these moments that they feel safe. And this sounds very cultish, but it's not so bad, is like, oh, cool, AI. And like, yes, our actual technology has AI and it can do these cool things that like matter. Yeah. But that's not the core. In fact, ironically, what makes our businesses work, our solutions, I should say, is you get a dedicated human.
Yep.
And that becomes your Sherpa, your guide through the whole thing. So it's like the antithesis of AI, even though the brand has the letters AI, it's at .ai, and it's just sort of fascinating, I think, to in the art of influence and leadership, how you do have to recognize what's happening in the world, even if your wisdom is contrary to that. I think so many people don't, as I'll put it biblically, live in the world while they're not of the world. It's like, yes, you are maybe somebody that is living out of this world and you're thinking and you're, the way you see the cosmos, but you're rendered useless if you're not in the world, meeting people where they're at and saying, hey, I know how you feel. I felt the same way. Let me tell you what I found. So I like this conversation because I think we're aligned in the way that we like address the reality of these things, but sort of low key reject them or maybe redirect them back to things that are timeless. If that makes sense.
I think the word that you use, wisdom, I think that's the kicker, right? I think people are rushing in, and I think artificial intelligence replaces knowledge, but it doesn't replace wisdom, right?
How can it?
And I think that, like you said, if you go back, right, Solomon, the wisest man in the world. Okay, well, the truths that Solomon was talking about are still universally true.
Yep.
Thousands of years later.
And he was the wealthiest, right? So the part that for my business folks listening, like that, if you've been wondering, like, is it knowledge or is it wisdom? We've come out of the age of knowledge. We're not in the age of information. The information age occurred back to about that same time that you mentioned, the 70s, and like we've probably seen this time lapse when you take like the amount of data and information, and even Google, which is almost considered antiquated, now, which is kind of nuts, like almost from in our language, like it's not even like, oh yeah, I Googled it. It's like, you Googled it? It couldn't possibly be good then. It's like, oh, I chatted it or I AI'd it or whatever the cool kids are saying, right? So, but nonetheless, like we've graduated or come through the age of information. Yeah. We're back in the age of wisdom. I say back in because these things are cyclical, right? And sort of timeless. But the thing I wanted to mention earlier before I got on a rant, which is common for me, and sort of why I don't trust it, is because it was created by man. Yeah. And it's like, I am of the belief that God created me, and anything that I create is mainly shitty. Like mainly, like my kids included, like, and it's like, what? It was like, yeah, like they're great, but like they're humans. They're flawed, and they do things because, this is very Christian of me, but it's like they were born in sin. They were born into a fallen, broken world, and that might be depressing. There's actually a really good news to that, which is that somebody came to take care of that. My boy JC. But I look at it and think it just can't be that good if it was made by humans, even though humans have made some amazing things. But if you show me like a mall or a building and it's like, man, look at that architect there, like look at the technology, it's never going to compare to looking at the ocean or the sun or the Niagara Falls, or, like Mount Rushmore just doesn't really do it for me compared to looking at the Rockies, and seeing something that God created. So I think that's maybe a little bit of a thing too, is if you can just like put it over there in the category of things human beings that have made that are pretty damn cool, then yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that humans made a lot of stuff that has made our life different, but it never, I think, compares to what humans are, because humans were made by God, not by other humans. Ironically, even though there's obviously birth. Yeah,
you're right.
That's a whole nother thing, but I just wanted to state it.
No, I think you're exactly right with that. And I think that I think that inflection point, going back to, the original part of our conversation, with my brother and things, and then just having that realization, like, what are the things that actually matter, right? Because if you tear it all down, for example, I was joking with my wife, probably shouldn't have been joking, but I was like, this could all go up in flames in a couple seconds. I mean, if
some dark humor,
bigger happy with some nukes, then, she's like, well, what would happen then? I'm like, well, we've got much bigger problems then.
Right.
But the basis of who we are as people, that's kind of the unchanging, right? That's the thing that is universal. And, like you're saying, like if you believe in something bigger, a higher plane, like you and I do, then those are the things that are eternal, right? So not just universal, but then things that are eternal, right? And so what are the things that last forever? So if you want to talk investment, okay, what's a great investment? Well, if you know things that are going to last, that are universal and eternal, the best thing you can invest time in is people. Right. And then, obviously, your spiritual relationship as well. So
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. So I know that we're going to be over the coming months crafting, and maybe I'm communicating this to you for the first time. So the idea going into this event, the Core Collective in Eugene, Oregon, in September, October, is, I like to build things in a sequence that has a bit of a arc to it, or a rising action, or a crescendo.
Yeah.
And I think it would probably shock people how simple that actually is. It's really like a set up, execute, finish, tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them. Even this interaction live here on the podcast, it wouldn't have been the same if we hadn't had that previous Zoom meeting, because there's been some established alignment and parallels and just ways we view the world. So I'm not saying this is like earth shattering, but in the coming weeks and months, I intend to meet with all the speakers pretty regularly, like at least once a month for the next 3 months, but probably more like 5 or 6 times is the goal, to synthesize and to really get people into their sweet spot, so that by the time they speak, whether it's to 100 people, 500, whatever, it like smacks, right? And it's like, oh, right. And the theory there is like, load the deck, dude, like give people like, give them the punchline, because the shock factor is not what's going to do it. It's the belief of like, here it comes. Yes. Like it's the whole information versus confirmation.
Yeah.
So I know we're going to actually craft this. Have you thought about, or do you have a go-to, like what are you thinking you will be speaking on in Eugene, Oregon at the Core Collective?
Yeah.
And I know that's still like not entirely drilled down. So you could be like, I don't know yet. That's okay too.
Well, that is always my go-to, because we'll see, where other people are at and stuff like that. The thing that I that I've been speaking on. I was speaking out a couple weeks ago. I'm going to Bend, Oregon next week. I'm speaking at an event there.
Cool.
Is really around the idea that the title of the talk is about adapting and having resilience despite change. Because, like you're saying, like things are ramping up and it's getting crazy. So the thing that I find fascinating, so I go through, this whole thing about like technology advancement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's okay. The big question is then what should our response be to that? And the most amazing thing that I find is that most people don't have any clue where they want to go. I see this at a company level. I see this at personal levels with people. When I get into annual planning sessions with teams, I'm with executive teams. And one of the first exercises we do together is to say, okay, what are your personal goals? And most people have never thought about that. They're just waking up, going through motions, and they don't have a clue where they're going. It's like, okay, well, if you don't have a clue where you're going, or like you haven't set a direction, you're not going to like where you end up. But if you don't have something that you're shooting for, then yeah, the changes of life are going to take you wherever the hell they're going to take you.
Right.
But if you have, some internal, like, no, I want to go here. I want to do this. I want to make these things a reality. It's like, okay, now that is going to set a trajectory for you that most people have never thought about, And so even in this event, it was an emerging leaders event. And I had asked the question, I said, how many of you, have written goals for this year? And of the, I don't know, there wasn't a big crew. There's probably 30 people there. 3 people have raised their hands. I was like, okay, so a tenth of you have written something down. That checks out in society. But it is amazing to me because, again, I think the world kind of, there's so many doors that open to a person that has purpose and intention of their life. And if people are not setting that intention, then it can be easy to get frustrated because you're not actually in control of your own life. And I think that's the thing that most people want. They want to be ridiculously control of their own life. The thing is, you already are.
Right.
So somebody just needs to say, go make it happen then. Like, you're already in control. Go do it.
That's good, man. I'm excited for that. I'm like, I want to take notes. I think too, there's a challenge with the amount of choice that there is. You described your grandfather earlier and kind of his career path and the way that he was in the world of work. And at that time, things were pretty basic as far as where you went. You went to medical school, you became a lawyer, you worked in the trades. Like now, you can't go to a grocery store and get milk without 17 versions of it. It's like almond milk. Okay, but like there's like 4 different almond milk. So, and then there's like oat milk, but there's like 3 of those oat milk. So if we live in a world where you can just walk into here, it'd be Publix, and you're sitting there going like, I don't know, like, I guess I'll just get what I've always gotten.
Yeah.
And then you get on social media and find some obscure article about how this just in almond milk is horrible for you. And you're like, wait, what? It's like, so the misinformation that's out there, it's like, not to mention it might be horrible for you, but not for that person, and it's like, like all these things, like you can't quite figure it out. And it's like, I mean, I know people that have smoked until their 80s and 90s and died. And you're like, so is smoking bad for you? And it's like, I think we figured that one out, but then it's like, what about vaping and what about Zens and nicotine? This stuff makes me feel like I'm ready to rock. And it's like, yeah, but you're like putting nicotine in your lip every day for 40 years. Like what's that going to compound to? So I think that is such an important talk and conversation. And I look forward to hearing it because if you don't have that direction and you don't have that goal, it's not that you will necessarily be aimlessly wandering. It's that you will be choosing so many things that you get even more tripped up. I think LinkedIn is like a prime example of this. And this is like kind of harsh, but I'd be like that. So when I see that notification that everybody celebrates when they say started a new position at, that shit drives me crazy, dude. I'm like, that just means that you quit or you gave up, or you didn't bring enough value to that organization, and then you hopped to another one. So like, I'm hardcore about that, and it's because I'm just like, whatever, like I'm locked in, I'm MyCORE for life. Yeah. But it irks me, not that it happens, because that person's life is their life, and you gotta do what you gotta do. The fanfare that comes with it is what blows my mind. Is that like a business owner, myself, you could be like, just spoke at an event, 7 people's lives radically changed. Crickets. Oh, cool. Like, awesome. 17th job in 4 years, and everyone's like, yes, go. It's like, oh, you got another job at an entry level freaking SDR. Like, so anyway, I'm the worst when it comes to that shit, because I'm just like, I hate her. But
it's so true though, because I don't think that the human brain is capable of handling that much information. I mean, it's like milk is a good example, but even like, I think about like our parents and grandparents' generation, especially like in rural Montana, like who did you marry? Well, you had a choice of like 7. And so you picked the prettiest one, I guess.
And you're like, you're not in my family, right?
Right.
So it's like your cousin, no, she's pretty, but you can't marry her.
Yeah, can't marry her. But now it's like, okay, well, I have choice overload, because like, well, there's millions of people that I could choose from. It's like, yeah, but you won't.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to actually go through those million people to choose. Are you familiar with it's a concept called Dunbar's number?
Oh, yeah. I haven't thought about this in a while. Yeah.
So it's 150 people. And then you get to like 150 people is about the number of relationships that you can actually manage.
Yeah. I remember hearing about the Gore-Tex. It was in one of Simon Sinek's books. I think it was, might have been Leaders Eat Last, might have been Blink. I can't quite remember, but could have also been one of Malcolm Gladwell's, because I'm a big fan of both of them. But they talk about the Gore-Tex sites where they ended up limiting each of them to 150, right? And that's why I learned about it for the first time. But that's cool.
Yeah. And so in the same way, it's when we talk about human relationships, and then how do we have, how do we gain wisdom from other people? Because so I take that 150, and then you break it down into like, the 5, right? Jesus had his 3, he had his 12, he had his 70, right? So there's a good model there as well. But it's like, hey, who are those peers, or who is that inner circle that is actually helping you like process and bringing wisdom, mentors, coaches, people that you ask into your life, because you want them to draw the best out of you. You want them to pour the best of you into, them into you. It's amazing because, right, going back to the almond milk thing, it's like, okay, but then in the same way, let's be skeptical.
Yeah.
Who wrote that study? Who paid them?
Right. Which big pharma, big agriculture, big something.
And so how do you eliminate the noise? Right. And so I think that's again, I feel very strongly, like you were saying, people just changing other jobs. Like, that's just because they didn't have direction. Like, most people fall into jobs. It wasn't because they were like, you know what, this is exactly what I'm going to do. Are you familiar with this Harvard study? There was a Harvard study in 1979. They were tracking MBAs. You familiar with the study? So
tell me. Yeah.
Okay, so they were MBA grads, 1979. And it's all right. So Master of Business Administration, 1979, Harvard. These aren't like people that are sloughing too much.
Right.
But they took
schlep rocks.
Yeah. They took the graduating class and they tracked them for 10 years. And when they graduated, they asked them, do you have goals? I think it was like 84% did not have any goals. They just were like, yeah, no, I'm just graduating, whatever. 13% had goals. And then another 3% had goals, and they had specific plans of what they were going to do. And so they tracked them over 10 years. And at the end of the 10 years, the thing that was interesting is that the 13% that had written goals were making about twice as much as their counterparts that had no goals, which is interesting. But the real kicker was that the 3% that had goals and actual tangible plans were making 10 times what everybody else was making. And so, right, going back to this business thing. So when I present, that information and say, listen, if you don't have a plan, if you don't have even written goals, like I'll start with that, most people don't have that. If you have those written down and then you have some plan of attack to make it happen, you're going to automatically put yourself in rare air. And that then the universe or, whatever is going to align to pave that path for you. And I don't think it's not perfect, right? But it's better than not.
But if like to your point and to the study, if you could know that, because you just heard it from Jason, like, what if you did just write them down? Like, what if you did just make a plan? Like, what if you took a day and you didn't react to all the things and demands of life and business, and you planned in solitude? I say this to the team a lot, and sometimes it's maybe chock full of some bravado, because I'd be like that sometimes. But I just say, well, the reason why most of the choices for MyCORE's path are made by me isn't because I'm smarter, isn't because I have a title or ownership. I said it's because I think about it more than you. I just know I do. There's no way that you're up all night thinking about it the way that I am. Like, that's the gift I've given you, is that you get to not have to think as much. But then those insights and that mastermind, it becomes so congealed that their little piece of input does change the trajectory because they have an insight at the ground level, or they have an insight because we naturally have blind spots about ourselves or about our organizations. So I think that part's really important too, is to say, like, how do you move from being an individual contributor to being part of a collective, being part of the aggregate? And that's a hard thing to surpass and to sort of graduate from. I get asked a lot, Jason, like, why'd you start a podcast, dude? Like, do you make money from that? Is that like, and
no,
right. I'm like, you're kind of asking the wrong question, but here's what's interesting. I just got to spend an hour and a half and learned a lot from you today.
Yeah.
I even got some reps in on how to respond to those things, right? Because it's a conversation. It's a two-way street. We're putting on an event where some really brilliant people are coming together to share. So I think a lot of times in business, life, leadership, combination thereof, people don't become enough of a product of the product, and it's like, I started a podcast for me, not for you. Like, I don't care if anyone listens, because I would love to have this conversation with Jason regardless. Why not record it, make sure the audio's right, chop it up into short form, put it out on the internet, and then have that become a magnet? So I think a lot of people just get so locked in, like you said, to the grind and the day-to-day, that they don't like stop and smell the roses and get perspective. And it sounds like you're almost coming into their lives, into their businesses, and like, I don't know if you've ever physically done this, but it's like you're grabbing them by the neck a little bit and like tilting their head and saying, like, I can show you the world, helping them get this perspective that they're just missing because of the grind.
Yeah. One thing that I do with companies, and it's excruciating. It's something that it's called a Think 30. And so if you've heard of it, basically the idea is that you have 30 minutes where what you're going to do is you're actually just going to turn your brain on to a problem, to whatever. A lot of times, people are overwhelmed with whatever stuff's going on, right? And so you got to train yourself. You take a timer on your phone, whatever, and you set 10 minutes. And all you're doing is you've got a blank piece of paper in front of you and a journal or whatever, legal pad. And for 10 minutes, you do nothing but think. Now, the reason it's excruciating, if you've never done the practice, is 10 minutes is a freaking long time to just sit with your own thoughts. And it's amazing what happens, because you're going to be thinking about everything. Like did I turn the oven off? Did I, I think I brushed my teeth, right? Like, then other business things start to show up. And then the timer goes off after 10 minutes. You set it for another 10 minutes. And you just write whatever is coming to you. It's going to be, again, random. Like, you're going to have all these different things. But it's amazing what happens is and it's another excruciating 10 minutes. But then what happens is after that 10 minutes, the last 10 minutes is you start putting a puzzle together. You're like, what were all these thoughts about? And it's amazing the insights that come in that last 10 minutes, because you've allowed your brain just to like slowly slow down, catch up. And so when I do that with groups of leadership teams, like, you can hear like everybody's just like, they're feeling nervous after 5 minutes. Going back to your thing about like productivity, efficiency, and stuff like that. And you think that it's like, dude, it's 30 minutes. It's only 30 minutes, but it's a very intentional 30 minutes. And it's a
That's
good
cool.
yeah, it's a good practice for people that they feel overwhelmed. It's also a good practice if you have a very specific question or thing that you're trying to figure out, and you just write the question down. Same thing. Don't do anything for 10 minutes. Write thoughts about it, and then it's amazing what happens. So
that's
anyway.
powerful, man. I would imagine in your sessions, like what a commitment that is from you too, as a speaker, a trainer, to allocate those 30 minutes, right? Because it's like you might only have an hour and you're like, man, I'm giving a lot of airtime to my normal show, like the thing I put on. But I bet it has massive impact where people go like, dude, you just unlocked because if you do it in a group setting, that would be really fascinating. I'm sure you could hear a pin drop, during those times.
Yeah. And when I do it with groups like that, I only do it for 15. Like we're not even going to we're going to do 5 minutes. Like,
right. You cut it in half. I think 15. Yeah, man. Dude, that's cool. Well, I am super stoked that we got to do this episode. I feel like we could talk forever. So much alignment in the way that we think, and we'll obviously be in communication. I am going to be in Oregon Wednesday the 18th to Wednesday the 25th. So I have a hunch that Curtis and Susan Marie have probably already thought for us to get together, because we're gonna take a couple days and just like go off the grid for the book. But other than that, there'll be kind of some connecting going on, and I'm going to go down to the venue and get a bunch of content from there. And so we can start like really heavily promoting. We kind of let this last couple months between building the web page, getting the venue, the speakers, but we're going to go like full send on promoting, like I just did during this podcast throughout the entire thing.
What is the event again?
Right. I was like, really, dude? That's messed up.
You can say it again, right?
Yeah, that's right. Since you asked, it's in Eugene, Oregon. Go to mycore.ai and go to the Core Collective, get your ticket. Yeah, man, I really appreciate your time today. I'm stoked to go back and listen, and I think I'm going to take notes because you dropped some serious nugs. I appreciate you.
You too, man. Yeah, I am glad that we were able to make this happen. So looking forward to hopefully we can make something happen. My schedule's pretty open in the next couple weeks, but cool. It'll be fun.
Awesome, man. Look forward to it.